My daughter is a Navy SEAL. Every head in the courtroom turned at once. All eyes landed on the sharp, unshaken voice that was utterly unexpected. Some laughed, some scoffed, a few pulled out their phones to record. Who is she? Someone whispered. Probably delusional, another snorted. What's next? The janitor claiming her son's an astronaut. Laughter rippled through the gallery. Jonathan exploded in racist fury. Military. What? Cleaning latrines. His rage intensifies. SEALs? Your kind doesn't produce SEALs. Stop living in fantasies and stick to mopping floors, you lying thief. But Evelyn didn't flinch at 68. She has seen her share of condescension, but never had she felt the sting more sharply. Hi, my beautiful family. If you are enjoying this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like the video and comment where you are watching from. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories. And trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's continue. The steam rose from Evelyn Hayes's coffee cup like morning prayers in the pre-dawn darkness of her small apartment. 68 years of waking up at 4:30 a.m. had trained her body to rise before the alarm, and today felt no different despite the court summons folded neatly on her kitchen table. The yellow legal paper seemed to glow under the fluorescent light, announcing charges that made her hands shake. Theft, fraud, criminal trespass. Lord, give me strength, she whispered, the words falling into the silence of her one-bedroom home on the outskirts of Phoenix. The walls held 15 years of employee appreciation certificates from Sterling Defense Corporation, each one signed by a different supervisor who had long since moved on to bigger things. Only the photograph on her nightstand mattered now, a young woman in crisp navy dress blues, eyes fierce with determination, gold trident gleaming on her chest. Evelyn's fingers traced the frame. Patricia, baby, I wish you were here. The drive to downtown Phoenix felt longer than usual in her aging Toyota Camry. Rush hour traffic crawled past the towering glass monuments to corporate power, each building reflecting the rising sun like golden shields. Sterling Defense Corporation stood tallest among them, 37 floors of steel and ambition reaching toward heaven itself. For 15 years, Evelyn had cleaned every inch of those offices, arriving when the executives left their dinner parties and departing before they returned with their morning lattes. Invisible, she murmured, pulling into the courthouse parking lot. That's how they like us. Meanwhile, across the city in his penthouse office, Jonathan Sterling stood before windows that offered a commanding view of Phoenix sprawling toward the desert horizon. His reflection stared back, sharp features, silver hair perfectly styled, a navy blue suit that cost more than most people earned in months. At 52, he commanded an empire built on defense contracts and political connections, each deal adding another zero to his net worth. His phone buzzed with updates from his legal team. The cleaning lady's hearing was scheduled for 2 p.m., a minor inconvenience in his carefully orchestrated day. But Sterling wanted to be there personally. Examples mattered. Discipline mattered. When word spread that Sterling Defense prosecuted theft to the fullest extent, regardless of the perpetrator's age or circumstances, it would send the right message to every janitor, security guard, and maintenance worker in his employ. Helen, are we ready? He asked his attorney as she entered the office carrying thick legal folders. Helen cross-nodded, her blonde hair pulled back severely, her expression all business. The evidence is overwhelming. Security footage shows her in restricted areas after hours. The missing laptop was found in her cleaning cart. Open and shut case. Sterling smiled, the expression cold as winter rain. Good. I want her to understand the consequences of stealing from me. Sometimes you have to make an example. The media might spin this as a wealthy CEO attacking a poor elderly woman, Helen warned. Let them. I built this company by making hard decisions. If that woman thought her age would protect her from justice, she thought wrong. The morning sun climbed higher, casting shadows across the city like dark omens. In her apartment, Evelyn finished her simple breakfast of toast and jam, the same meal she'd eaten for decades. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, washing the single plate and cup, wiping down the counter, preparing to face whatever waited for her in that courtroom. The photograph of Patricia watched from the nightstand, young and proud in her military uniform. Evelyn remembered the day it was taken, Graduation from Navy Basic Underwater Demolition Training. The toughest military program in the world, they said. Less than 1% of applicants ever earned those golden wings. Nobody believed you could do it then either, Evelyn whispered to the picture. They said a girl from the projects couldn't become a warrior. But you showed them all. Her phone rang, startling her from the memory. Unknown number. Hello. Static crackled through the line. Then a familiar voice emerged. Mom. Can you hear me? Patricia. Evelyn's heart leaped. Baby, where are you? I can't say exactly, but I'm safe. I heard about the court hearing today. Mom, I'm so sorry I can't be there. Don't you worry about me, honey. I'll handle this. Mom, listen carefully. Tell them about me if you have to. Tell them exactly who your daughter is and what she does. Can you do that? The line crackled again, Patricia's voice fading in and out. I love you, Mom. This will all be over soon. The call ended, leaving Evelyn staring at her phone. Tell them who you are, she thought. Tell them what you've done. But would anyone believe that a cleaning lady could raise a Navy SEAL? By noon, protesters had gathered outside the courthouse. Word of the hearing had spread through social media like wildfire. Wealthy white CEO prosecutes elderly black cleaning lady for theft. Signs bobbed above the crowd, justice for Evelyn, and sterling shame. Local news vans lined the street, reporters applying makeup inside mirrors, preparing to capture whatever drama unfolded inside. Detective Roy Campbell pushed through the crowd, his weathered face grim with purpose. 25 years on the Phoenix police force had taught him to recognize trouble, and this case reeked of it. The evidence against Evelyn Hayes was almost too perfect. Security footage that clearly showed her face, the stolen laptop conveniently placed in her cleaning cart, witness testimony from a security guard who happened to be watching at just the right moment. Too clean, he muttered, climbing the courthouse steps. Real crimes are messy. Inside, Evelyn sat alone at the defendant's table, her best dress, a simple black outfit she'd worn to church for 20 years, making her look even smaller in the vast courtroom. She'd refused the public defender, unable to explain that her daughter had taught her to fight her own battles. The gallery behind her filled slowly with curious onlookers, their whispers echoing off the marble walls like accusations. Sterling entered with his legal team, their expensive shoes clicking against the floor in perfect rhythm. He took a seat in the front row, close enough to watch Evelyn's face when the verdict came down. Close enough to see justice served. Judge Catherine Brennan called the court to order at exactly 2 p.m., her voice cutting through the murmur of conversation like a blade. She was known for running a tight courtroom, for treating rich and poor with equal measures of respect and scrutiny. This is a preliminary hearing in the matter of State versus Evelyn Hayes, Judge Brennan announced. The defendant stands accused of theft, fraud, and criminal trespass. How does the defendant plead? Evelyn stood slowly, her knees protesting after decades of cleaning floors on her hands and knees. Her voice, when she spoke, was quiet but clear. Not guilty, Your Honor. The whispers grew louder. Someone in the gallery laughed. Sterling leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the woman who had dared to steal from him. What none of them knew was that 3 miles away, at Luke Air Force Base, a black helicopter was receiving final clearance for takeoff. Inside, Commander Patricia Hayes checked her watch and spoke into her headset. This is SEAL Team 6. We're airborne and en route. ETA 15 minutes. The battle for Evelyn's dignity was about to begin, but the real war would be won by a daughter's love and a mother's quiet strength. In 15 minutes, everyone in that courtroom would learn what it meant to underestimate the Hayes family. But first, they would watch an old woman stand alone against the weight of money and power, armed with nothing but the truth and the unshakable knowledge that sometimes, just sometimes, the righteous are not abandoned. The prosecution's case unfolded like a carefully choreographed performance. Helen Cross stood before the judge, her voice crisp with confidence as she painted Evelyn Hayes as a calculating thief who had exploited 15 years of trust to steal classified military technology. Your Honor, the evidence is overwhelming, Helen declared, clicking a remote that brought the courtroom's large screen to life. Security footage from November 8th shows the defendant entering restricted areas of Sterling Defense Corporation well past her authorized cleaning hours. The video played in stark black and white. Evelyn watched herself on screen, pushing her cleaning cart down a hallway she'd walked thousands of times before. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m. She remembered that night clearly because she'd stayed late to finish cleaning the executive conference room after a spilled coffee incident that morning. Note the defendant's suspicious behavior, Helen continued, pointing at the screen with a laser pointer. She looks around nervously before entering the secured server room. Evelyn's throat tightened. She had looked around, but only to make sure no late-working executives would be startled by the sound of her vacuum cleaner. 15 years of being invisible had taught her to move through the building like a ghost. Sterling leaned forward in his seat, satisfaction gleaming in his eyes. This was justice in action. This was how you maintained order in a company that handled billion-dollar defense contracts. Furthermore, Helen clicked to the next slide. The stolen laptop containing classified defense protocols was discovered hidden beneath cleaning supplies in the defendant's cart. The laptop belongs to Sterling Defense's cybersecurity division and contains information vital to national security. Judge Brennan studied the evidence with careful attention. Has the defendant been questioned about how this laptop came to be in her possession? She claims she found it in a trash bin and intended to return it to Lost and Found, Helen replied with barely concealed disdain. A story that strains credibility, given the laptop's value and the classified nature of its contents. The gallery buzzed with whispers. Evelyn felt 300 pairs of eyes boring into her back like accusations. She wanted to stand and explain, to tell them about finding the laptop among discarded papers in Jonathan Sterling's personal office trash can, how she'd recognized it as valuable and planned to return it the next morning. But her court-appointed legal aide had advised her to remain silent during the prosecution's presentation. Detective Campbell shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Something about this case continued to bother him. In his experience, real thieves didn't leave stolen goods in plain sight. They certainly didn't plan to return them to Lost and Found. But the evidence was undeniable, captured in high-definition clarity. The defendant has worked as a cleaning lady for Sterling Defense for 15 years, Helen continued, her tone growing more pointed. 15 years of access to offices, computers, and sensitive documents. Who knows what else she might have stolen during that time? Who knows what classified information might have already been sold to foreign powers? Objection! The voice came from the back of the courtroom, surprising everyone. A middle-aged man in an ill-fitting suit had stood up. Your Honor, I'm Attorney Michael Reeves. I've just been retained to represent Mrs. Hayes. Judge Brennan raised an eyebrow. Mr. Reeves, this is highly irregular. The defendant declined legal representation. She's changed her mind, Your Honor, and I'd like to cross-examine the prosecution's evidence immediately. Sterling's jaw tightened. Where had this lawyer come from? His background check on Evelyn Hayes had shown no family members with the means to hire private counsel. Helen Cross looked equally surprised but recovered quickly. Your Honor, the prosecution objects to this disruption. We weren't notified of new counsel. The defendant has the right to legal representation, Judge Brennan ruled. Mr. Reeves, you may proceed, but keep it brief. Michael Reeves approached the evidence table with confident strides. He was younger than he'd first appeared, perhaps 40, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Mrs. Hayes, would you please tell the court why you were in the Sterling Defense Building on the night of November 8th? Evelyn stood slowly, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I was finishing my cleaning duties, sir. There had been a coffee spill in the executive conference room that morning, and the carpet needed extra attention. And this required you to work past your normal hours? Yes, sir. I take pride in my work. That building has been my responsibility for 15 years, and I've never left a job half done. Sterling snorted audibly. Pride in her work. She's a common thief. Judge Brennan's gavel cracked like thunder. Mr. Sterling, you will remain silent or be removed from my courtroom. But Sterling was beyond caring about courtroom protocol. 15 years of watching this woman clean his offices, 15 years of barely noticing her existence, and now she had the audacity to steal from him? Your Honor, this is ridiculous. We all know what happened here. She saw an opportunity and took it. People like her always do. The words hung in the air like toxic smoke. People like her. The phrase echoed through the gallery, drawing gasps and angry murmurs from the crowd. Michael Reeves seized the moment. Mr. Sterling, since you seem eager to participate, perhaps you'd like to explain why a laptop containing classified information was found in your personal office trash can? The courtroom erupted. Sterling shot to his feet, his face flushing red. That's impossible. I would never throw away classified materials. Yet that's exactly where Mrs. Hayes found it, Reeves continued calmly. Mixed in with your discarded newspapers and coffee cups. She removed it from your trash, intending to return it to the proper authorities the next morning. Helen Cross was on her feet instantly. Objection! There's no evidence supporting this claim. Actually, there is. Reeves held up a manila folder. Security footage from Mr. Sterling's office shows him discarding papers and a laptop computer into his personal wastebasket at 6:23 p.m. on November 8th. The same laptop found in Mrs. Hayes's cleaning cart 4 hours later. Sterling's world tilted sideways. He remembered that evening clearly. He'd been rushing to leave for a dinner party, his desk cluttered with paperwork from multiple projects. In his haste, he must have swept everything into the trash, including the cybersecurity laptop he'd borrowed earlier that day. This is preposterous, Sterling shouted, his carefully maintained composure cracking like thin ice. Even if I accidentally discarded the laptop, that doesn't give her the right to take it. She didn't take it, Reeves replied smoothly. She rescued it. Mrs. Hayes has worked faithfully for your company for 15 years without a single incident. Her employee record is spotless. Why would she suddenly decide to steal now? The question hung in the air, but Sterling was too angry to think rationally. All he could see was a cleaning lady who had embarrassed him in front of a packed courtroom. All he could feel was his authority being challenged by someone he considered beneath his notice. You want to know why? Sterling's voice rose to fill every corner of the courtroom. Because people like her are opportunists. They smile and say, yes, sir, and no, sir, while they plot to take what doesn't belong to them. 15 years she's been casing my building, learning our security procedures, waiting for her chance. Judge Brennan's gavel pounded repeatedly. Mr. Sterling, control yourself. But Sterling was beyond control. Years of unchecked privilege and racial bias poured out of him like poison from a broken bottle. You think I don't know what this is about? You think I don't see the game being played here? Poor old black woman versus rich white businessman. Well, I built my company from nothing. I earned every dollar through hard work and smart decisions, not by stealing from trash cans. The gallery exploded in angry shouts. Someone yelled, racist. Another voice cried, shame. Judge Brennan threatened to clear the courtroom, but the damage was done. Sterling's true nature had been revealed for everyone to see. Michael Reeves watched the chaos with satisfaction. The trap had been set perfectly, and Sterling had walked into it willingly. Your Honor, I'd like to call a character witness for Mrs. Hayes. Absolutely not. Helen Cross objected. This was supposed to be a simple preliminary hearing. The prosecution opened the door by questioning my client's character and motives, Reeves countered. I have the right to respond. Judge Brennan considered for a long moment as order slowly returned to her courtroom. I'll allow one character witness, Mr. Reeves. But make it quick. Thank you, Your Honor. I call Mrs. Hayes herself to explain why someone who has never committed a crime in 68 years of life would suddenly decide to steal classified technology. Evelyn rose from her chair with dignity that silenced the room. Every eye focused on her as she approached the witness stand, her simple black dress a stark contrast to the expensive suits surrounding her. She placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, her voice clear and strong. Mrs. Hayes, Michael Reeves began gently, please tell the court about your work ethic and your family. Evelyn looked out at the packed gallery, at the news cameras and the faces filled with curiosity and judgment. Then her eyes found the photograph in her purse, the image of Patricia in her navy dress blues, and strength flowed through her like electricity. I have worked every day of my adult life, she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. Cleaning offices, raising my daughter, keeping my home. I taught my child that honest work has dignity, that service to others matters, that character is measured not by what you own but by how you treat people who can't help you in return. Sterling rolled his eyes, but something in Evelyn's tone made him listen despite himself. "My daughter learned those lessons well," Evelyn continued, and now her voice carried a note of pride that made several people in the gallery lean forward. "She serves our country in the United States Navy. She's a warrior who fights to protect the freedom and security that we all enjoy." "What branch of the Navy?" Reeves asked, though he already knew the answer. "She's a Navy SEAL," Evelyn said simply, and the courtroom fell silent as death. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Sterling's laughter shattered the silence like breaking glass. "A SEAL!" He rose from his seat again, his face twisted with disbelief and contempt. "Your daughter is a Navy SEAL? Do you have any idea how ridiculous that sounds?" "Mr. Sterling, sit down," Judge Brennan commanded, but Sterling was beyond listening. "Navy SEALs are the elite of the elite." He pointed an accusing finger at Evelyn. "They're the best of the best, chosen from thousands of applicants. They don't come from cleaning ladies and broken homes. They don't come from people like you." The word struck Evelyn like physical blows, but she stood straight and proud on the witness stand. "My daughter graduated from basic underwater demolition training at the top of her class," she said quietly. "She earned her trident through blood, sweat, and determination that would break most men." "Lies!" Sterling's voice cracked with fury. "Pathetic, desperate lies. What's next? Is she an astronaut too? Maybe a Supreme Court justice?" The gallery buzzed with uncomfortable energy. Some people looked embarrassed by Sterling's outburst, while others seemed to share his skepticism. The idea of a cleaning lady's daughter becoming a Navy SEAL did strain credibility. "Mr. Sterling, final warning." Judge Brennan's voice cut through the chaos, but Sterling was too far gone to care about judicial warnings. "Your Honor, this is exactly what I'm talking about." He spread his arms wide, addressing the entire courtroom. "This woman steals classified technology for my company, gets caught red-handed, and now she expects us to believe she's the mother of some military superhero? It's fantasy. It's manipulation. It's exactly the kind of lie that career criminals tell when they're backed into a corner." Michael Reeves stepped forward calmly. "Mr. Sterling, are you saying that Mrs. Hayes is lying about her daughter's military service?" "I'm saying it's impossible." Sterling shot back. "Look at her. Look at where she comes from. Navy SEALs don't grow up in poverty. They don't come from single mothers who clean toilets for a living. They come from military families, from prep schools, from people with breeding and education and discipline." Each word was a dagger aimed at Evelyn's heart, but she stood firm. Patricia had faced worse insults during SEAL training. Patricia had endured challenges that would have destroyed Sterling's pampered existence. If her daughter could survive Hell Week, then Evelyn could survive this moment. "Your Honor," Sterling continued, his voice dripping with condescension, "I've worked with the military for 20 years. I know what elite soldiers look like, and they don't look like her daughter. This is a pathetic attempt to gain sympathy by inventing heroic relatives. Next she'll claim her son is a Green Beret or her cousin is a Marine general." The courtroom had grown quieter as Sterling's rant continued, the audience sensing that something fundamental was happening. This wasn't just about a stolen laptop anymore. This was about respect and dignity and the assumptions people made based on race and class. Michael Reeves checked his watch discreetly. "Any minute now." "Mrs. Hayes," he said gently, "would your daughter be willing to testify on your behalf if she were available?" "She would," Evelyn replied, her voice strong despite the tears threatening to fall. "But she's deployed overseas on classified missions. She can't just come home for a court hearing." Sterling laughed again, the sound ugly and harsh. "How convenient! The imaginary Navy SEAL daughter is too busy saving the world to help her criminal mother." "Of course she is." The courtroom doors at the back of the room opened quietly. Nobody noticed at first because all attention was focused on the drama unfolding at the front. But then came the sound of boots on marble, measured and precise, moving with military bearing. Michael Reeves smiled as he heard the footsteps approaching. "Your Honor, it appears we have a surprise witness." Judge Brennan looked toward the back of the courtroom, and her eyes widened in shock. The entire gallery began to turn, following her gaze, and gasps filled the air. Walking down the center aisle, still wearing full combat gear from a classified mission, came Commander Patricia Hayes. Her uniform was dusty from desert operations. Her face showed the weathered confidence of someone who had stared death in the eye and won. The golden trident on her chest caught the courtroom lights like fire. Behind her walked 5 more Navy SEALs, their presence transforming the courtroom into something that felt more like a military briefing room. Each man moved with the lethal grace of a predator, their eyes scanning for threats with automatic precision. Sterling's mouth fell open. His face went pale as understanding crashed over him like a cold wave. The cleaning lady wasn't lying. Her daughter really was a Navy SEAL. Not just any SEAL, but a commander leading what appeared to be an active operations team. Patricia's eyes found her mother first, and for just a moment, the hardened warrior's mask slipped to reveal a daughter's love. Then her gaze shifted to Sterling, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Your Honor," Patricia said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to command, "I apologize for the dramatic entrance. I'm Commander Patricia Hayes, United States Navy SEALs. I understand there are questions about my mother's character." The courtroom had gone completely silent. 300 people held their breath as they watched the impossible become reality. Sterling stared at Patricia like she was a ghost, his brain struggling to process what his eyes were showing him. Michael Reeves stepped forward with barely contained satisfaction. "Commander Hayes, thank you for coming. Can you tell the court about your mother's influence on your military career?" Patricia looked at Evelyn with pure love and admiration. "My mother taught me that honor isn't about what you have, it's about what you do. She showed me that real strength comes from serving others, even when they don't appreciate it. Every lesson that made me worthy of wearing this uniform came from watching her live with dignity and integrity every single day." She turned to face Sterling directly, and her voice hardened like steel. "My mother has cleaned your offices for 15 years without complaint. She has worked overtime without extra pay, stayed late when needed, and treated your property with more respect than you apparently treat your employees. The idea that she would steal anything is not just wrong, it's insulting to everything she taught me about honor." Sterling opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. What could he say? How could he argue with a Navy SEAL standing in his courtroom, defending the woman he had just finished calling a liar and a thief? The first plot twist hit the room like a shockwave. The cleaning lady really had raised a Navy SEAL. But the second twist was about to prove even more devastating. Patricia reached into her tactical vest and pulled out an official document. "Your Honor, I have additional information that might be relevant to this case. It concerns Mr. Sterling's defense company and its relationship with the United States military." Judge Brennan accepted the document with trembling hands. As she read, her expression grew increasingly grave. "Mr. Sterling," the judge said slowly, "are you aware that your company is currently under investigation for fraudulent billing practices related to classified defense contracts?" The courtroom erupted again, but this time the chaos centered on Sterling. Reporters scrambled for their phones, recognizing a breaking news story when they saw one. The man who had been prosecuting a cleaning lady for theft was himself facing charges of stealing from the United States government. Sterling's world collapsed in real time. Not only had he publicly humiliated himself by attacking the mother of a Navy SEAL, but now his own criminal activities were being exposed in the same courtroom. The laptop that started this whole mess contained evidence of his company's fraudulent billing practices, evidence he had tried to destroy by throwing it away. Patricia stepped closer to Sterling, her presence overwhelming in the confined space. "Mr. Sterling, my team and I have been investigating defense contractor fraud for the past 6 months. Your company's name came up repeatedly in our investigation. The laptop my mother found contained evidence of your illegal activities. She didn't steal classified technology. She inadvertently preserved evidence of your crimes." The final pieces fell into place like dominoes. Sterling hadn't just accidentally thrown away a laptop. He had deliberately tried to destroy evidence of his fraudulent billing schemes. When Evelyn rescued the laptop from his trash, she had unknowingly preserved the very evidence that would bring him down. Detective Campbell stood up in the gallery, finally understanding why this case had felt wrong from the beginning. Your Honor, I'd like to place Jonathan Sterling under arrest for fraud, obstruction of justice, and filing false charges. Sterling looked around wildly, searching for escape routes that didn't exist. His expensive lawyers were already backing away, distancing themselves from a client who had become radioactive in the span of 5 minutes. "This is impossible," he shouted. "I'm being set up. This is a conspiracy." Patricia's voice cut through his protests like a blade. "Mr. Sterling, you set yourself up the moment you decided to steal from the American taxpayers. My mother didn't destroy your life. You did that all by yourself." As Detective Campbell approached with handcuffs, Sterling's gaze fell on Evelyn, still standing dignified and proud on the witness stand. The woman he had dismissed as worthless, the mother he had mocked as a liar, had unknowingly been the instrument of his downfall. Justice, it seemed, had a sense of irony that even a millionaire's arrogance couldn't escape. The handcuffs clicked around Jonathan Sterling's wrists with a sound that echoed through the stunned courtroom like a death knell. Detective Campbell's weathered hands were steady as he secured the restraints, but his eyes held the satisfaction of a man who had finally seen justice served after 25 years on the force. "Jonathan Sterling, you are under arrest for federal fraud, conspiracy to defraud the United States government, obstruction of justice, and filing false criminal charges." Campbell recited the Miranda rights with practiced precision. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Sterling's face had gone from red with rage to white with shock in the span of minutes. The transformation was so complete that several people in the gallery pulled out their phones to capture the moment when Phoenix's most arrogant millionaire became just another criminal in handcuffs. "This is a mistake." Sterling's voice cracked as he struggled against the restraints. "I demand to speak to my attorney. Helen, do something." But Helen Cross was already backing toward the courtroom exit, her expensive briefcase clutched against her chest like a shield. 20 years of corporate law had taught her to recognize a sinking ship, and Jonathan Sterling's vessel was going down faster than the Titanic. "I'm sorry, Jonathan, but I represent Sterling Defense Corporation, not you personally," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You'll need criminal defense counsel. I can recommend several excellent firms." The betrayal hit Sterling like a physical blow. The woman who had been his legal champion 30 minutes ago was now abandoning him to save her own career. In the span of an hour, he had lost his freedom, his reputation, and the loyalty of everyone around him. "You can't do this to me," he shouted as Detective Campbell began leading him toward the exit. "I built this city. I employ thousands of people. I donate millions to charity." Commander Patricia Hayes stepped forward, blocking his path to the door. Her presence was overwhelming in the confined space, 6 feet of trained lethality wrapped in desert camouflage and unshakable moral authority. "Mr. Sterling," her voice was quiet but carried the weight of absolute conviction, "you employed my mother for 15 years and never once bothered to learn her name. You treated her like she was invisible until you needed someone to blame for your own crimes. Now you want to talk about charity and generosity." Sterling tried to meet her gaze but found himself looking away. There was something in Patricia's eyes that reminded him of apex predators he'd seen in nature documentaries. Beautiful, but absolutely deadly when provoked. "Your mother is a thief," he said weakly, his earlier conviction crumbling under Patricia's stare. "The evidence proves it. The evidence proves you threw a laptop containing records of your fraudulent billing practices into the trash," Patricia replied coldly. "My mother rescued it, thinking she was being helpful. Instead, she preserved the evidence that's going to send you to federal prison." The words hung in the air like a judge's sentence. Sterling's mind raced, trying to find some angle, some argument that could reverse his fortune. But every path led to the same destination: disgrace, bankruptcy, and years behind bars. "I want a lawyer," he mumbled finally, the fight going out of him like air from a punctured balloon. Detective Campbell nodded grimly. "You'll get your phone call at the station. Right now, you need to walk out of here with whatever dignity you have left." The media circus outside the courthouse had grown exponentially. News vans from every major network in Arizona lined the street, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like metallic flowers. Reporters shouted questions over each other as police officers cleared a path through the crowd. Mr. Sterling, how long have you been stealing from the government? Is it true you tried to frame an innocent woman? What do you have to say about your racist comments in court? Sterling kept his head down as Campbell guided him through the gauntlet, but the questions followed him like accusations. His entire world was collapsing in real time, broadcast live to millions of viewers who were just now learning that Phoenix's most prominent defense contractor was actually a common criminal. Inside the courthouse, Judge Brennan struggled to restore order to her courtroom. The revelation that a federal fraud investigation had been unfolding parallel to this theft case had transformed a simple preliminary hearing into the legal equivalent of a three-ring circus. "Ladies and gentlemen," she called out, her gavel working overtime, "I'm calling a recess to allow all parties to process these new developments. Mr. Reeves, I assume you'll be filing motions to dismiss all charges against your client." Michael Reeves stood with barely contained satisfaction. The plan had worked perfectly, though even he hadn't expected Sterling to self-destruct so spectacularly. "Yes, Your Honor. Given that the alleged victim is now facing federal charges for fraud, and the supposed stolen property was actually evidence of his crimes, I believe the charges against Mrs. Hayes should be dropped immediately." Motion granted, Judge Brennan ruled without hesitation. "Mrs. Hayes, you are free to go. The court apologizes for the ordeal you've endured." But as the judge's words registered, Evelyn Hayes remained seated at the defendant's table, her hands folded in her lap, her expression unreadable. The vindication she had waited for was finally here, but the cost of achieving it left her feeling hollow rather than triumphant. Patricia approached her mother's table, her combat boots silent on the marble floor despite their weight. The warrior who could infiltrate enemy compounds undetected moved with the same careful grace in civilian settings. "Mom!" Patricia's voice was gentle, the hardened commander temporarily replaced by a concerned daughter. "It's over. You're free." Evelyn looked up at her daughter, and for the first time since the hearing began, tears filled her eyes. Not tears of joy, but something deeper and more complex. "He called you a liar," she whispered, her voice so quiet that Patricia had to lean closer to hear. "He said people like us don't raise children like you. He said it was impossible." Patricia knelt beside her mother's chair, bringing their faces level. The courtroom around them had begun to empty, but neither woman noticed the departing crowd. "Mom, he was wrong about everything. His words don't matter." "But they do matter," Evelyn replied, her voice growing stronger. "Not because they're true, but because he believed them so completely. How many other people think the same way? How many others look at me and see only a cleaning lady who couldn't possibly have raised someone extraordinary?" The question hung between them like a bridge neither wanted to cross. Patricia had spent her entire military career proving herself against similar prejudices, fighting twice as hard as her male counterparts to earn half the recognition. She understood the weight of other people's low expectations better than most. "Let them think what they want," Patricia said finally. "We know the truth. That's what matters." But Evelyn shook her head slowly. "No, baby. The truth is that I've been invisible for so long that I started to believe I deserved it. 15 years I cleaned his offices, and he never once saw me as a human being. I was just furniture to him, something that appeared after hours and disappeared before he arrived." The pain in her voice cut through Patricia like a blade. All the military honors, all the classified missions, all the lives saved in foreign countries couldn't protect her from watching her mother confront a lifetime of casual dismissal and systemic disrespect. Michael Reeves approached their table with careful steps, recognizing a private moment when he saw one. "Mrs. Hayes, I wanted to discuss your legal options going forward. You have grounds for several civil suits: wrongful prosecution, defamation, emotional distress, workplace discrimination." Evelyn wiped her eyes with a tissue from her purse, the same purse that held Patricia's graduation photo. "I don't want his money, Mr. Reeves. Money won't give me back 15 years of being treated like I didn't matter." "Mom," Patricia said urgently, "you should consider it. He needs to face consequences for what he did to you." "He's facing consequences," Evelyn replied, gesturing toward the window where they could hear the media circus continuing outside. "His life is ruined. His company will collapse. He'll probably go to prison. Isn't that enough?" Patricia wanted to argue, but something in her mother's tone stopped her. This wasn't about revenge or financial compensation. This was about dignity, about a woman who had spent her entire life serving others, finally demanding to be seen as a complete human being. "What do you want, Mom?" Patricia asked softly. Evelyn stood slowly, smoothing down her simple black dress with hands that had cleaned thousands of offices and raised a Navy SEAL. Her answer came quietly but with absolute conviction. "I want to go back to work." The word surprised everyone within earshot. Michael Reeves nearly dropped his briefcase. Patricia's eyes widened in shock. "Mom, you can't be serious. After what Sterling put you through. After what the company allowed to happen." "Sterling doesn't own the company anymore," Evelyn pointed out with logic that cut through emotion like a scalpel. "He'll be in federal prison soon, and someone else will take over. Those offices still need cleaning. The people who work there still deserve a clean, professional environment." She paused, looking around the courtroom that had been the stage for her public humiliation and ultimate vindication. "But I want things to be different this time. I want a fair wage. I want respect. I want to be treated like an employee, not like a ghost." Michael Reeves found his voice first. "Mrs. Hayes, with respect, you don't need to work anymore. The civil suits alone could set you up for life. You could retire comfortably." "Mr. Reeves," Evelyn's voice carried a note of steel that reminded Patricia of the woman who had raised a Navy SEAL. "I've worked every day of my adult life. Work gives my life purpose and meaning. I'm not about to stop now just because I could afford to." She turned to face her daughter directly. "Patricia, you risk your life every day protecting people who will never know your name. You serve something bigger than yourself. Well, so do I. I keep America's defense contractors running smoothly by maintaining their work environment. I'm part of national security too, in my own small way." The words hit Patricia like a revelation. She had always been proud of her mother's work ethic, but she had never connected it to her own sense of service and duty. Evelyn wasn't just a cleaning lady. She was a woman who had found dignity and purpose in honest labor, who had used that foundation to raise a daughter capable of serving at the highest levels of the military. "You're right," Patricia said slowly, understanding flooding through her. "You are part of it. You're part of everything that makes this country work." Evelyn smiled for the first time since entering the courtroom. "Now you understand why I can't just walk away. Sterling tried to destroy my reputation and my character. If I disappear now, if I take his money and retreat, then he wins. He gets to be right about who I am and what I'm worth." She straightened her shoulders, and suddenly the simple black dress looked less like a disguise and more like a uniform. "But if I go back to work, if I demand the respect I've earned, if I show everyone that a cleaning lady can have dignity and pride and purpose, then I win. Then every woman like me wins." Michael Reeves began to understand what he was witnessing. This wasn't just about one woman's fight for justice. This was about systemic change, about challenging the assumptions that allowed men like Sterling to treat service workers as invisible and disposable. "Mrs. Hayes," he said carefully, "if you're determined to pursue this path, I want to help. Not for money, but because what you're doing matters." Patricia stood and placed her hand on her mother's shoulder. "I'll help too. Between a Navy SEAL and a civil rights attorney, I think we can make sure your voice gets heard." But even as they made their plans, none of them noticed the black sedan that had been parked across from the courthouse for the past hour. Inside the vehicle, two men in expensive suits watched the building through tinted windows, their faces grim with purpose. "Phase 1 is complete," the driver spoke into a secure phone. "Sterling has been neutralized, but the situation is more complicated than we anticipated." "How complicated?" the voice on the other end demanded. "The cleaning lady's daughter isn't just a Navy SEAL. She's Commander Patricia Hayes, leader of SEAL Team 6. She has access to classified information about defense contracts across the entire military-industrial complex." There was a long pause before the voice responded. "That changes everything. Sterling was just a greedy contractor. The daughter could bring down the entire network if she connects the right dots." The passenger leaned forward. "What are your orders?" Monitor the situation. If Commander Hayes becomes a threat to our operation, we'll need to take more direct action. The sedan pulled away from the courthouse as the sun began to set over Phoenix, casting long shadows across the desert city. Inside the building, Evelyn Hayes was planning her return to work, unaware that her victory had just painted a target on her family's back. Sterling's arrest had been just the beginning. The real conspiracy stretched far beyond one man's greed, and the people behind it had resources that made a millionaire's wealth look like pocket change. Patricia's training kicked in as she noticed the sedan departing, her instincts telling her that something wasn't right. She made a mental note of the license plate and the vehicle description, filing the information away for future reference. The battle for Evelyn's dignity had been won, but the war for justice was just getting started. And this time, the enemy wouldn't underestimate the cleaning lady or her Navy SEAL daughter. The fluorescent lights in the federal building's conference room cast harsh shadows across the faces of 6 people who had never expected to find themselves in the same room together. What had begun as a simple theft case had exploded into a federal investigation that threatened to expose corruption reaching the highest levels of the defense contracting industry. Special Agent Maria Santos closed the thick file folder she'd been reading and looked across the table at the unlikely group assembled before her. Evelyn Hayes sat with the same quiet dignity she displayed in court, her simple black dress unchanged despite the day's revelations. Beside her, Commander Patricia Hayes had traded her combat gear for civilian clothes, but the warrior's alertness never left her eyes. "Mrs. Hayes, Commander Hayes," Agent Santos began, her voice carrying the authority of 15 years with the FBI. "I'm going to be direct with you. What happened in that courtroom today was just the tip of the iceberg. Jonathan Sterling's fraudulent billing scheme is connected to a much larger conspiracy." Michael Reeves shifted in his chair, his legal instincts on high alert. "Agent Santos, my client has already been through enough today. If this is about additional charges—" "It's not," Santos interrupted. "Mrs. Hayes isn't a suspect. She's a witness. And potentially she's in danger." The words hit the room like a cold wind. Patricia's posture straightened, her military training immediately assessing threats and escape routes. Evelyn's hands tightened in her lap, but her expression remained calm. "What kind of danger?" Patricia asked, her voice carrying the edge of someone accustomed to making life-and-death decisions. Agent Santos opened another file, this one marked with classification stamps that made Patricia's eyes narrow. "Commander, given your security clearance, you'll understand the implications better than most. Sterling Defense Corporation was being used as a front to launder money from illegal arms sales to foreign governments. The laptop your mother found contained not just billing records, but communications with arms dealers in 3 different countries." Patricia felt the pieces clicking together in her mind like the components of a precision weapon. That's why the laptop was in Sterling's personal trash. He wasn't just trying to hide billing fraud. He was trying to destroy evidence of international arms trafficking. "Exactly," Santos confirmed. "And now that evidence is in federal custody, thanks to your mother's actions. The people behind this operation have lost millions of dollars and face decades in prison. They're not going to let that slide." Evelyn found her voice, though it came out smaller than she intended. "Are you saying they might try to hurt me?" "Mrs. Hayes, these aren't white-collar criminals we're dealing with. They're part of an international network that has killed witnesses before. The fact that you inadvertently exposed their operation makes you a target." Detective Campbell, who had been silent until now, leaned forward in his chair. "How serious a target?" Santos pulled out a series of surveillance photographs, spreading them across the table like tarot cards predicting doom. The images showed the black sedan that Patricia had noticed outside the courthouse, along with telephoto shots of its occupants. "These men have been watching the courthouse since before the hearing began," Santos explained. "We've identified them as operatives connected to the Nexus Group, a private military contractor that specializes in corporate espionage and witness intimidation." Patricia studied the photographs with professional interest. "PMCs. How many assets do they have in the area?" "At least a dozen that we've identified," Santos replied. "Possibly more. They have resources that make Sterling's wealth look insignificant." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. What had started as a victory celebration was rapidly becoming a crisis management session. "So what do we do?" Evelyn asked quietly. "Do I hide? Do I run?" "We protect you," Patricia said immediately, her voice carrying absolute conviction. "Whatever it takes." Agent Santos nodded approvingly. "That's exactly what we had in mind. We're placing both of you in protective custody until we can roll up this entire network. The safe house is equipped with full security, and we'll have federal marshals on site 24 hours a day." But Evelyn was already shaking her head. "I'm not hiding from these people. I've spent my whole life being invisible, and I just decided I'm done with that." "Mom," Patricia's voice carried a note of urgency, "this isn't about pride anymore. These people kill witnesses. They won't hesitate to hurt you to protect their operation." "And if I hide, they win," Evelyn replied with steel in her voice. "They get to intimidate me back into invisibility. They get to make me disappear again." Michael Reeves cleared his throat diplomatically. "Mrs. Hayes, I understand your position, but perhaps we could find a middle ground. What if you stayed at the safe house temporarily, just until the immediate threat passes?" Evelyn considered this for a long moment, her fingers unconsciously touching the photograph of Patricia that she still carried in her purse. When she spoke again, her voice was thoughtful but determined. "How long would that be? Days? Weeks? Months? And what happens when I come out? Do I spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder?" Agent Santos shifted uncomfortably. "Mrs. Hayes, with respect, witness protection cases like this can take years to fully resolve. The network we're dealing with has tentacles in multiple countries." "Years," Evelyn repeated quietly. "Years of hiding. Years of being afraid. Years of letting them control my life." Patricia reached across the table to take her mother's hand. "Mom, it's not about control. It's about keeping you alive." "Baby, you risk your life every day doing what you believe is right," Evelyn replied, squeezing her daughter's fingers. "You don't hide from danger when innocent people need protecting." "Well, maybe this is my mission. Maybe I need to stand up and be counted, not just for myself, but for every service worker who's ever been treated like they don't matter." The passion in her voice surprised everyone in the room. This wasn't the quiet cleaning lady who had been on trial a few hours ago. This was a woman who had found her voice and refused to be silenced. Detective Campbell studied Evelyn with new respect. "What exactly are you proposing, Mrs. Hayes?" "I'm proposing I go back to work," she said simply. "Tomorrow morning, I want to return to Sterling Defense Corporation and resume my duties. But this time, I want to do it as part of the FBI investigation." Agent Santos nearly choked on her coffee. "You want to go undercover? Mrs. Hayes, with all due respect, you're not trained for that kind of operation." "I don't need training," Evelyn replied calmly. "I've been invisible in that building for 15 years. I know every office, every employee, every routine. If there are other people involved in this conspiracy, if there are documents or communications you need to find, I can get them for you." Patricia stared at her mother with a mixture of pride and terror. "Mom, that's incredibly dangerous. These people already suspect you're involved." "Let them suspect," Evelyn said with quiet determination. "Suspicion isn't proof. And if I'm wearing a wire, if I'm working with the FBI, then everything they say and do becomes evidence against them." The room erupted in simultaneous conversations as everyone tried to process Evelyn's proposal. Agent Santos was shaking her head emphatically. Michael Reeves was citing legal precedents about civilian involvement in federal investigations. Detective Campbell was calculating risks and benefits. But Patricia was studying her mother with the analytical mind of a military strategist. And slowly, a smile began to spread across her face. "It could work," she said quietly, cutting through the chaos. Everyone turned to stare at her. Agent Santos looked particularly incredulous. "Commander, surely you're not seriously considering this?" "I'm absolutely considering it," Patricia replied, her voice growing stronger as the plan took shape in her mind. "Think about it from an operational perspective. Mom has perfect cover. She's supposed to be there. She has access to areas that would take us weeks to infiltrate. And most importantly, they won't see her coming because they've spent years training themselves not to see her at all. Agent Santos opened her mouth to object, but Patricia held up a hand. Agent Santos, I've planned and executed covert operations in hostile territory. The key to success is using assets that the enemy doesn't recognize as threats. My mother is the perfect invisible operative. Your mother is a civilian, Santos pointed out firmly. She has no training in surveillance, evidence collection, or personal security. She can be trained, Patricia countered. Basic surveillance and communication protocols can be taught in a few hours. And she won't be alone. I'll be providing overwatch. You. Santos looked confused. Commander, don't you have military obligations? Patricia's smile turned predatory. Actually, I've just been reassigned. Effective immediately, I'm working as a liaison between Navy intelligence and the FBI's investigation into defense contractor corruption. My commanding officer was very interested when I explained the situation. The pieces were falling into place with military precision. Patricia had used her connections to insert herself directly into the investigation, ensuring she could protect her mother while serving her country. This is insane, Michael Reeves muttered, but there was admiration in his voice. Absolutely insane. It's what we do, Patricia replied simply. We identify threats to national security, and we eliminate them. The only difference is this time, we're doing it together. Agent Santos looked around the room, recognizing that she was outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Even if I agreed to this lunacy, which I'm not saying I am, there would be conditions. Strict protocols. Backup plans. Of course, Evelyn said, speaking for the first time in several minutes. I understand the risks, Agent Santos. But I also understand that running away isn't always the answer. Sometimes you have to fight. The federal agent studied the cleaning lady with new eyes, seeing not just a potential witness but a woman who had spent her entire life fighting for dignity and respect in small, quiet ways. Maybe it was time to let her fight on a bigger stage. All right, Santos said finally. I can't believe I'm saying this, but all right. We'll set up a preliminary operation. 1 day only, full surveillance, minimal risk. If anything goes wrong, if there's even a hint of danger, we pull you out immediately. Evelyn nodded gravely. Understood. And I want a full tactical team in place, Patricia added. Snipers, communication specialists, rapid response units. If Mom is going in there, she's going in with the full protection of the United States military. Detective Campbell chuckled despite the tension. Mrs. Hayes, I think you might be the first cleaning lady in history to have her own personal army. Good, Evelyn replied with the hint of a smile. Maybe now people will start treating service workers with the respect we deserve. As the meeting continued into the evening, plans took shape with the precision of a military operation. Evelyn would return to Sterling Defense Corporation the next morning, wearing concealed recording equipment and following carefully rehearsed protocols. Patricia would coordinate the surveillance from a mobile command center, using her military resources to ensure her mother's safety. But none of them knew that their conversation was being monitored by the same shadowy figures who had watched the courthouse that afternoon. The Nexus Group had resources that extended far beyond private security, including sophisticated electronic surveillance capabilities. In a nondescript office building across town, a man in an expensive suit listened to the FBI meeting through encrypted headphones, his face growing darker with each word. The game had just become infinitely more dangerous for everyone involved. The morning sun painted the Phoenix skyline in shades of gold and crimson as Evelyn Hayes stood before the towering glass facade of Sterling Defense Corporation. The building looked different somehow, less intimidating than it had yesterday. Perhaps it was because she was no longer approaching it as an invisible servant, but as a federal operative on a mission that could save lives. The tiny microphone taped beneath her collar felt foreign against her skin, a reminder that everything had changed in the span of 24 hours. Through her earpiece, she heard Patricia's calm voice providing final instructions. Mom, remember, you're looking for anything that connects other employees to the arms trafficking network. Documents, conversations, computer access after hours. Don't take any unnecessary risks. I understand, baby, Evelyn whispered, her words barely audible to the sophisticated recording equipment hidden in her cleaning supplies. I've been walking these halls for 15 years. Today won't be any different. But as she badged into the building using her still active security card, Evelyn knew that everything was different. The familiar weight of her cleaning cart felt heavier somehow, loaded not just with mops and disinfectant, but with the hopes of justice for countless victims of illegal arms sales. The lobby was empty except for Tommy Blake, the young security guard who had testified against her yesterday. He looked up from his desk with obvious discomfort, his face flushing red when he recognized her. "Mrs. Hayes," he stammered, clearly not expecting to see her. I didn't know you were coming back." Evelyn studied the young man with new eyes, remembering Agent Santos's warning that the conspiracy might include other Sterling Defense employees. Tommy had been the primary witness who claimed to have seen her stealing the laptop, his testimony presented as ironclad proof of her guilt. "Good morning, Tommy," she replied calmly, her voice giving nothing away. "Mr. Sterling might be gone, but these offices still need cleaning." Tommy shifted nervously in his chair. "About yesterday, Mrs. Hayes, I want you to know I was just doing my job. I had to report what I saw." "Of course you did," Evelyn said, pushing her cart toward the elevators. But as she walked away, she activated the recording device in her pocket. Something in Tommy's voice didn't ring true, a note of guilt that went beyond simple regret. The elevator ride to the executive floors felt longer than usual, each floor bringing back memories of the past 15 years. She had cleaned these offices through 3 different CEOs, countless mergers and acquisitions, economic booms and recessions. The building held more of her life than her own apartment. But as the doors opened on the 37th floor, where Sterling's personal office waited, Evelyn felt a chill that had nothing to do with the building's air conditioning. Something was wrong. The usual after-hours lighting was different, brighter than normal, as if someone else had been here recently. Patricia's voice crackled through her earpiece. "Mom, we're reading elevated security activity in the building. 3 additional personnel signed in after midnight last night, but they haven't signed out." Evelyn froze, her hand tightening on the cart handle. "Should I leave?" "Negative. We have assets in position. Continue with the mission, but stay alert." Moving with the practiced efficiency of 15 years, Evelyn began her cleaning routine in the outer offices. But her eyes were constantly scanning for anything unusual, any sign that the building was being used for purposes beyond legitimate defense contracting. It was in Sterling's personal office that she found the first clue. Hidden behind a false panel in Sterling's mahogany desk, Evelyn discovered a collection of documents that made her blood run cold. Purchase orders for weapons shipments to countries under international sanctions. Financial records showing payments from shell companies in offshore accounts. And most damning of all, photographs of Sterling meeting with men she recognized from wanted posters in the building's security office. "Patricia," she whispered into her microphone, "I've found something." Sterling wasn't just billing the government fraudulently. He was selling American weapons to terrorists. The silence from her earpiece stretched for several seconds before Patricia's voice returned, tight with controlled anger. "Mom, photograph everything you can, but be quick about it. We need that evidence." Using the camera hidden in her cleaning supplies, Evelyn began documenting the cache of incriminating materials. Each photograph revealed another layer of betrayal, another violation of the trust placed in defense contractors. Sterling hadn't just been stealing money. He had been endangering American soldiers by putting advanced weapons in the hands of their enemies. But as she worked, a sound from the hallway made her freeze. Footsteps, moving with purposeful intent towards Sterling's office. Heavy boots that didn't belong to any office worker. "Patricia," she whispered urgently, "someone's coming. Copy that. 3 men, armed, heading for your location. Mom, you need to hide. Now." Evelyn's mind raced through her options. Sterling's office had only one exit, and the approaching footsteps were blocking it. But 15 years of cleaning had taught her about spaces that others never noticed. Behind Sterling's oversized bookshelf was a service panel that led to the building's maintenance corridors, passages designed for repair crews but perfect for an invisible cleaning lady who knew every inch of the building. She slipped through the panel just as the office door opened. Through the thin wall, She could hear voices speaking in low, urgent tones. The accent was Eastern European, possibly Russian, and their conversation chilled her to the bone. "The cleaning lady took photographs," the first voice said. "Our surveillance confirmed she accessed the hidden compartment." "How much does she know?" a second voice asked. "Too much. The FBI meeting last night revealed the full scope of their investigation. They know about the arms sales, the money laundering, everything." Evelyn's heart pounded as she realized they had been monitoring the FBI's communications. These weren't just Sterling's criminal partners. They were sophisticated operatives with resources that rivaled government agencies. "What about the daughter?" the third voice inquired. "Commander Patricia Hayes, Navy SEAL Team 6. She's currently coordinating the FBI surveillance from a mobile command post 3 blocks away. Eliminating her would send a clear message about the consequences of interfering with our operations." The casual way they discussed murdering her daughter sent ice through Evelyn's veins. These men weren't just criminals. They were killers who viewed human life as a business expense. Through her earpiece, she heard Patricia's voice, tense with urgency. "Mom, we've lost visual contact. 3 more vehicles just arrived at the building. This is going sideways fast. Sterling's replacement will arrive Monday morning," the first voice continued. "We need this situation resolved before then. The new CEO cannot discover the true nature of our partnership." "Understood. The cleaning lady and her daughter will be eliminated before the weekend. Make it look like a home invasion." Evelyn had heard enough. She began moving through the maintenance corridors with the silent efficiency that 15 years of invisible work had taught her. But as she navigated the familiar passages, her mind was processing the implications of what she'd overheard. Sterling hadn't been the mastermind of the arms trafficking operation. He had been a puppet, controlled by international criminals who were now planning to install their own person as CEO of Sterling Defense Corporation. The entire company was being used as a front for a massive criminal enterprise. She reached the service elevator that connected the maintenance levels to the parking garage, but as the doors opened, she found herself facing 2 men in dark suits. Their eyes widened in recognition, and their hands moved toward concealed weapons. "Mrs. Evelyn Hayes," one of them said with a heavy accent, "you have caused us considerable trouble." Before they could draw their weapons, Patricia's voice exploded through her earpiece. "Mom, get down!" The building's lights went out simultaneously as Navy SEAL snipers opened fire from surrounding buildings. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red as chaos erupted throughout Sterling Defense Corporation. Evelyn dropped to the floor as gunfire echoed through the corridors. Her 15 years of invisible servitude had prepared her for many things, but not for finding herself in the middle of a federal raid that resembled a military assault. Through her earpiece, she heard Patricia coordinating the operation with the calm professionalism of someone who had done this before. "All units. Building is compromised. Multiple hostiles, armed and dangerous. Protect the asset at all costs." The asset. Even in the middle of a firefight, Evelyn found herself smiling. After a lifetime of being invisible, she had become valuable enough to protect with military precision. But the smile faded as she realized the true scope of what they were fighting. This wasn't just about Sterling's crimes or even the arms trafficking network. This was about a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of the defense contracting industry, a shadow network that used American companies to funnel weapons to America's enemies. And she, a 68-year-old cleaning lady from Phoenix, had stumbled into the middle of it by doing nothing more than her job with integrity and pride. The gunfire intensified, and Evelyn found herself thinking about Patricia's childhood, about all the nights she had worked overtime to pay for her daughter's education, about the pride she had felt watching Patricia graduate from SEAL training. Every sacrifice had led to this moment, when a mother's love and a daughter's skill would combine to expose a conspiracy that threatened national security. As federal agents stormed through the building, following Patricia's tactical coordination, Evelyn remained hidden in the maintenance corridor. But she wasn't cowering. She was listening to the radio chatter, learning about the scope of the operation she had helped expose. "Multiple arrests on floors 15 through 20, an agent reported. "Looks like the entire cybersecurity division was compromised." "Evidence team to the executive level," Patricia's voice commanded. The primary cache is in Sterling's office, behind the bookshelf. Handle with extreme care. Those documents are going to put a lot of people in federal prison." As the immediate danger passed, Evelyn emerged from her hiding place to find Patricia waiting for her, still wearing tactical gear and carrying enough weapons to outfit a small army. "Mom," Patricia said, her voice thick with emotion. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine, baby. But we need to talk. What I heard in that office, what these people are planning, it's bigger than anyone realized." Patricia nodded grimly. "I know. We intercepted their communications during the raid. This conspiracy involves at least 12 major defense contractors and reaches into Congress itself." Mother and daughter stood in the red-lit corridor, surrounded by the aftermath of a federal raid, and realized that their fight for justice was just beginning. Sterling's arrest had been the first domino in a chain reaction that would shake the foundations of American defense contracting. But they also realized something else. They weren't victims anymore. They were warriors in a battle for the soul of American democracy, armed with courage, determination, and an unbreakable bond between a mother and daughter who refused to be intimidated by anyone. The cleaning lady and the Navy SEAL were about to take on the most powerful criminal network in American history. And they were going to win. The safe house sat nestled in the Sonoran Desert like a fortress against the star-filled Arizona sky. Solar panels gleamed on the roof, and motion sensors tracked every movement within a half-mile radius. Inside, Evelyn Hayes sat at a kitchen table that had seen countless debriefings, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long since grown cold. Across from her, Patricia methodically cleaned her service weapon with the practiced motions of someone who had performed this ritual thousands of times. The familiar sounds of metal on metal provided a strange comfort in the aftermath of the day's chaos. "I keep thinking about what that man said," Evelyn murmured, breaking the comfortable silence. "That they were planning to make it look like a home invasion." Patricia's hands stilled on her weapon. "Mom, they're in federal custody now. All 3 of them. They can't hurt you anymore." "It's not about me," Evelyn replied, her voice carrying a weight that surprised her daughter. "It's about how easily they talked about killing us. Like we were just problems to be solved, not human beings with families and dreams and fears." She looked up from her coffee, and Patricia saw tears glistening in her mother's eyes. Not tears of fear, but of understanding. "For 15 years, I thought Sterling's indifference was the worst kind of prejudice," Evelyn continued. "Being invisible, being dismissed, being treated like furniture. But today I learned there are people who see us as even less than that. We're not invisible to them. We're obstacles." Patricia set down her weapon and moved to the chair beside her mother. The tactical vest she still wore looked strange in the domestic setting, a reminder that their new reality included bulletproof clothing and armed guards. "Mom, what you did today was extraordinary. You exposed a conspiracy that was funding terrorism with American weapons. You saved lives." "I was just doing my job," Evelyn said with a small smile. "Cleaning up messes, finding things that didn't belong. Same as always." "No," Patricia said firmly. "Not the same as always. Today you chose to fight back. Today you refused to be invisible." The kitchen fell silent except for the distant hum of security equipment. Through the reinforced windows, they could see the lights of Phoenix twinkling in the desert distance, a city full of people who had no idea how close they had come to being victims of international arms trafficking. Agent Santos entered the kitchen carrying a laptop and several thick files. Her usually pristine appearance showed the strain of coordinating a multi-agency operation that had expanded far beyond a simple fraud case. "Mrs. Hayes, Commander, I wanted to update you on what we've learned from today's raid," she said, settling into a chair across from them. "The scope of this conspiracy is staggering." She opened the laptop and turned it toward them, revealing a complex web diagram that looked like something from a spy thriller. Lines connected names, corporations, and government agencies across multiple continents. Sterling Defense was one of 12 companies involved in the network, Santos explained. They were using legitimate defense contracts as cover for illegal arms sales to sanctioned countries and terrorist organizations. The profits were being laundered through a series of shell companies and offshore accounts. Patricia studied the diagram with professional interest. "How long has this been going on?" "At least 8 years, possibly longer. The financial records we recovered suggest they've moved over $2 billion in illegal weapons sales. Evelyn felt a chill run through her. $2 billion worth of weapons to terrorists. Advanced weapons, Santos confirmed. Night vision equipment, body armor, encrypted communications gear, even components for improvised explosive devices. The kind of technology that American soldiers are facing in combat zones around the world. The implications hit Patricia like a physical blow. She had served multiple tours in hostile territory, had faced enemies equipped with sophisticated weapons that had always seemed too advanced for terrorist organizations to acquire legitimately. How many American soldiers died because of weapons sold by this network? She asked quietly. Santos's expression grew grave. We're still calculating the full impact, but preliminary estimates suggest dozens of casualties could be directly linked to weapons traced back to these companies. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of betrayal. These weren't just financial crimes or abstract corruption. This was treason that had cost American lives. What happens now? Evelyn asked. Now we build cases against everyone involved, Santos replied. And that's where we need your continued help. Both of you. Patricia looked up from the diagram. What do you mean? The network is wounded but not dead. Our raid captured the Phoenix cell, but there are operations in at least 6 other cities. The leadership is already adapting, trying to distance themselves from sterling defense and establish new cover companies. Santos pulled out another file, this one marked with the highest classification levels. We need someone on the inside of their replacement operation. Someone they won't suspect. Someone invisible. Evelyn and Patricia exchanged glances, understanding immediately what Santos was proposing. You want my mother to go undercover again, Patricia said. For how long? Potentially months. We're talking about a long-term infiltration of a new company they're establishing. Meridian Defense Systems, scheduled to begin operations next month with a roster of former Sterling Defense employees. Employees who might recognize Mom, Patricia pointed out. That's actually an advantage, Santos explained. Your mother's reputation as an honest, hard-working employee is well established. If she applies for a position at Meridian, they'll likely hire her without suspicion. She'll have access to their offices, their communications, their secret meetings. Evelyn listened to the conversation with growing amazement. 24 hours ago, she had been a defendant in a theft case. Now federal agents were asking her to help expose an international conspiracy. What would I actually be doing? She asked. The same thing you did today. Document everything. Record conversations. Photograph documents. But this time, you'd be working with a full support team and months of preparation instead of a few hours. Patricia's mind was already working through the operational challenges. Security protocols, communication methods, extraction procedures. This would be a major commitment. It would, Santos agreed. And it would be dangerous. But Mrs. Hayes has already proven she can handle herself in hostile situations. I need to think about this, Evelyn said quietly. This isn't just about me anymore. If something happens to me, it affects Patricia's military career, her future. Mom, Patricia said softly, my career doesn't matter if American soldiers are dying because of weapons sold by traitors. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Evelyn looked at her daughter, seeing not just the Navy SEAL but the little girl who had asked why some people were treated differently because of the color of their skin. The child who had promised to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. Tell me about the support team, Evelyn said finally. Santos smiled, recognizing the shift in tone. Full surveillance, emergency response capability, and a dedicated handler who would be in constant communication. Plus, Commander Hayes would be assigned as the military liaison for the operation. We'd be working together? Patricia asked. As much as operational security allows. This is too big for any one agency to handle alone. We need Navy intelligence, FBI resources, and someone on the inside who understands both the corporate culture and the criminal organization. Evelyn stood and walked to the kitchen window, looking out at the desert night. The landscape stretched endlessly toward the horizon, vast and unforgiving but also beautiful in its stark honesty. "When I was raising Patricia," she said without turning around, "I used to tell her that service comes in many forms. Military service, public service, community service. I thought my service was keeping offices clean so important people could do important work." She turned back to face them, her expression resolved. "I never imagined that my service might involve exposing people who were betraying our country. But if that's what's needed, if that's how I can honor the sacrifice of every soldier who died because of weapons these people sold, then I'll do it." Patricia felt pride swell in her chest. "Mom, are you sure?" "I'm sure," Evelyn replied with conviction. "But I have conditions." Santos leaned forward. "What kind of conditions?" "First, I want to understand exactly what I'm walking into. Full briefings on the people involved, their methods, their security procedures. I won't go in blind." "Agreed." "Second, I want guarantees that other service workers won't be put at risk. If there are custodians, security guards, maintenance staff at Meridian who aren't involved in the conspiracy, I want assurances they'll be protected." "Of course." "And third," Evelyn's voice softened as she looked at her daughter, "I want Patricia to be my primary contact. If I'm going to risk my life for this operation, I want to know that someone who loves me is watching my back." Patricia stood and embraced her mother, the tactical vest creating an awkward barrier between them but unable to diminish the power of the moment. "I'll be there, Mom. Every step of the way." Santos watched the exchange with professional interest and personal emotion. In 15 years with the FBI, she had seen many family members torn apart by the demands of undercover work. But she had never seen a family bond strengthen under pressure the way the Hayes women had. "There's something else you should know," Santos said. "The weapons sales we're investigating aren't just about money. Intelligence analysis suggests this network is part of a larger effort to destabilize American military operations overseas. This is economic warfare disguised as criminal enterprise." Patricia's expression hardened. "State-sponsored." "We're still investigating the connections, but there are indicators pointing to foreign intelligence services. If that's confirmed, this becomes a matter of national security at the highest levels." The kitchen fell silent as they contemplated the implications. What had started as a simple theft case had evolved into something that threatened the foundation of American military superiority. "So we're not just fighting criminals," Evelyn said slowly. "We're fighting enemies of the United States." "That's correct," Santos confirmed. "Then we better make sure we win," Evelyn replied with steel in her voice. Patricia looked at her mother with new understanding. The woman who had raised a Navy SEAL wasn't just strong and determined. She was a patriot who understood that freedom required constant vigilance and occasional sacrifice. "When do we start?" Patricia asked. "Training begins Monday morning," Santos replied. "We have 3 weeks to prepare before Meridian Defense Systems opens for business. 3 weeks to turn a cleaning lady into one of the most important intelligence assets in federal law enforcement." Evelyn smiled at the description. "Agent Santos, I've been gathering intelligence in corporate offices for 15 years. I just never realized that's what I was doing." She moved back to the table and picked up her cold coffee, taking a sip despite the temperature. "Now, let's talk about exactly how we're going to take down these traitors. I have some ideas about corporate cleaning schedules that might surprise you." As the 3 women bent over the files and diagrams, planning an operation that would span months and potentially save hundreds of lives, the desert wind howled outside the safe house. But inside, there was warmth and purpose and the unshakable bond between a mother and daughter who had found their calling in the fight for justice. The cleaning lady and the Navy SEAL were about to become America's most unlikely intelligence team. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the security perimeter, enemies who had underestimated them once were about to make that mistake again. But this time, Evelyn and Patricia Hayes would be ready. This time, they would be invisible only when it served their purposes. And this time, they would make sure that love, courage, and the American spirit triumphed over greed, betrayal, and foreign manipulation. The real mission was just beginning. 3 weeks of intensive training had transformed Evelyn Hayes into something she never imagined possible. A federal intelligence operative with a security clearance higher than most generals. But as she pushed her cleaning cart through the gleaming corridors of Meridian defense systems, all that preparation felt inadequate against the cold dread spreading through her chest. Something was wrong. Terribly, catastrophically wrong. The building should have been empty except for security personnel, but voices echoed from the executive conference room on the 32nd floor. Voices speaking in the same Eastern European accents she had heard during the Sterling defense raid. They weren't supposed to be here. According to 3 weeks of surveillance, the criminal leadership had fled Phoenix after the federal operation. Through her nearly invisible earpiece, Patricia's voice crackled with static-filled urgency. "Mom, we're picking up encrypted communications from your location. Multiple signals. Military-grade encryption. This isn't the skeleton crew we expected." Evelyn paused beside a supply closet, her heart hammering against her ribs. The familiar weight of recording equipment hidden in her cleaning supplies felt heavier than usual, burdened with the knowledge that she might be documenting her own death warrant. "How many?" she whispered, her lips barely moving. "At least 12 distinct signals. Mom, this is wrong. Intel said the building would be running minimal operations until the end of the month." The static in Patricia's voice was getting worse, and Evelyn realized with growing horror that someone was jamming their communications. The sophisticated equipment that had seemed so reliable during training was failing when she needed it most. She pressed herself against the wall as footsteps approached. 2 men in expensive suits walked past, their conversation casual but their body language tense with purpose. "The Hayes woman will arrive for her shift soon," one said in accented English. "Everything must be ready." "The daughter's surveillance team has been neutralized," the other replied. "She won't know anything is wrong until it's too late." The words hit Evelyn like ice water. They knew she was coming. They had been planning for her arrival. But worse, they had done something to Patricia's team. "Patricia," she whispered desperately into her microphone. "Can you hear me?" Nothing but static answered her. Moving with the practiced invisibility of 20 years in service work, Evelyn followed the men toward the conference room. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to escape the building while she still could. But the thought of Patricia's surveillance team in danger, the knowledge that American soldiers were dying because of weapons sold by these traitors, kept her moving forward. The conference room doors were slightly ajar, allowing her to position herself in a maintenance alcove where she could hear and record everything. What she witnessed through the crack in the door made her blood run cold. On a large screen at the front of the room, a map of military installations across the Middle East glowed with red targeting indicators. At least 20 bases were marked, each representing thousands of American servicemen and women. "The Phoenix operation has served its purpose," a man in a general's uniform was saying. His accent was definitely Russian, and the medals on his chest bore foreign insignia that Evelyn didn't recognize. "Sterling Defense gave us 3 years of intelligence gathering. Now we move to the final phase." A woman in a business suit stood beside the screen, pointing to specific locations with a laser pointer. "Simultaneous attacks on these installations will cripple American operations in 3 theaters. The weapons we've supplied to our allies will be used to maximum effect." Evelyn's hands shook as she realized the true scope of what she was witnessing. This wasn't just arms trafficking. This was a coordinated military assault on American forces, planned and funded by what appeared to be Russian intelligence. "What about the Hayes problem?" another voice asked. The general smiled coldly. "Commander Patricia Hayes and her surveillance team encountered an unfortunate accident 20 minutes ago. Their vehicle experienced mechanical difficulties on a remote desert road. By the time rescue arrives, hypothermia will have claimed all 4 occupants." The room spun around Evelyn as the words registered. Patricia was in danger. Her daughter, her warrior, her reason for fighting, was trapped somewhere in the desert while these monsters planned the deaths of thousands of Americans. And the mother? Someone else inquired. "She will suffer a tragic accident here in the building tonight. A slip and fall, perhaps. Or maybe she'll discover our meeting and force us to defend ourselves. Either way, she won't survive to testify." Evelyn felt something crack inside her chest. Not her ribs or her spine, but something deeper. The careful control she had maintained throughout 3 weeks of training, the professional demeanor Agent Santos had drilled into her, the quiet dignity she had worn like armor for 68 years. all of it shattered in the face of a mother's rage. They had hurt her daughter. They were planning to murder thousands of American soldiers. And they thought a cleaning lady was too insignificant to stop them. She was done being underestimated. Moving with purpose that surprised even herself, Evelyn began activating every piece of equipment hidden in her cleaning supplies. The camera, the recording device, the emergency beacon that would broadcast her location to every federal agency in Arizona. But as she worked, disaster struck. Her hand slipped on the recording device, and it clattered to the floor with a sound that echoed through the corridor like a gunshot. The conversation in the conference room stopped instantly. "What was that?" the general's voice demanded. Evelyn pressed herself deeper into the alcove, but it was too late. Heavy footsteps were already moving toward the door, and she could hear the distinctive sound of weapons being drawn. "Search the area," the general commanded. "Find whoever was listening." There was nowhere to run. The maintenance alcove was a dead end, and the corridor offered no concealment. In seconds, they would find her, and everything she had learned about their plans would die with her. But as the footsteps grew closer, Evelyn made a decision that surprised even herself. She stepped out of hiding. The sight of a small, elderly black woman in a cleaning uniform pushing a cart full of mops and disinfectant clearly shocked the armed men approaching her. They had been expecting federal agents or military operatives, not a grandmother who looked like she should be baking cookies instead of conducting espionage. "Excuse me," Evelyn said in the voice she had used for 20 years of invisible service. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I heard voices and wanted to make sure it was okay to clean this area." The lead gunman, a massive man with Slavic features and cold eyes, stared at her in confusion. His weapon remained drawn but wasn't quite pointed at her. "Who are you?" he demanded. "Evelyn Hayes, sir. I'm the new night custodian. I started tonight." She gestured toward her cleaning cart with hands that appeared steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. "I can come back later if you're in a meeting." The man's eyes narrowed with suspicion, but Evelyn could see uncertainty in his expression. The cover story was perfect because it was true. She was the new night custodian, and this was her first official shift. "Search her," the general's voice called from the conference room. The gunman approached Evelyn and began patting her down with professional efficiency. He found the recording device immediately, holding it up like evidence of guilt. "Federal surveillance equipment," he announced. "She's a spy." Evelyn's heart sank as her cover dissolved completely. But even as the man raised his weapon toward her, she felt a strange sense of peace. She had gotten the recording. The emergency beacon was transmitting. Somewhere in the desert, Patricia was fighting for her life, but reinforcements would be coming. "You think you're very clever," the general said, emerging from the conference room with the other conspirators. "The famous cleaning lady who exposed sterling defense. The woman who thinks she can bring down international intelligence operations with mops and recording devices." Evelyn looked at him with the steady gaze of someone who had spent her entire life serving others. "I think you're very wrong about what one person can accomplish when they're fighting for something bigger than themselves." The general laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. What could possibly be bigger than geopolitical power? Than reshaping the balance of military force in 3 continents? "Love," Evelyn said simply. "A mother's love for her daughter. A patriot's love for her country. The love that every service member feels for the people they're sworn to protect." "Sentimental nonsense," the general spat. "You're about to die for nothing. Your daughter is already dead. Your country will be crippled within hours. Your precious soldiers will be slaughtered by weapons we provided to their enemies." But as he spoke, Evelyn noticed something that gave her hope. Through the conference room windows, she could see flashing lights approaching in the distance. Multiple vehicles, moving fast across the desert toward the building. The emergency beacon had worked. "You're wrong about something," Evelyn said quietly. "What's that?" "You said my daughter was already dead. But you don't know Patricia very well." She smiled for the first time since entering the building. "She's a Navy SEAL. She doesn't die easy." The general's confident expression faltered slightly. "Your daughter's vehicle was sabotaged. They're stranded in freezing desert with no communications." Then you don't understand what Navy SEALs are trained to do, Evelyn replied. They survive the impossible. They adapt and overcome. And they never, ever abandon their missions. As if summoned by her words, the building's lights suddenly went out. Emergency power kicked in, bathing everything in red light that made the corridor look like a scene from hell. Through the darkness came a sound that made Evelyn's heart soar with relief and pride. The distinctive whistle pattern Patricia had used to call her for dinner throughout childhood. 3 short bursts, 2 long ones. The signal that meant, coming home. But it also meant something else. In Navy SEAL tactical communication, that same whistle pattern meant hostile environment, weapons free, no prisoners. The general's face went pale as he realized what was happening. How is this possible? Evelyn's smile widened. You made the same mistake everyone makes with the Hayes family. You underestimated us. The sound of boots in the stairwell echoed through the building like thunder. Heavy, rhythmic, military precise. Patricia was coming, and she wasn't coming alone. Kill her, the general screamed at his men. Kill her now. But as the gunmen raised their weapons, Evelyn did something that 20 years of cleaning had prepared her for perfectly. She dove behind her cleaning cart and started moving. For 20 years, she had navigated crowded offices with carts full of supplies, dodging furniture and employees with the grace of a dancer. Now she used those same skills to evade gunfire, using the cart as both shield and weapon as she crashed through the corridor toward the stairwell. Behind her, automatic weapons chattered like deadly typewriters, but Evelyn was already gone, moving through the building with knowledge that came from years of invisible servitude. The cleaning lady had become a warrior, and her daughter was coming to help her finish the fight. But as gunfire erupted throughout the building and the Russian assault plan collapsed into chaos, Evelyn realized that the worst was yet to come. In their desperation, these enemies of America might do anything to prevent their exposure, including turning Meridian defense systems into a tomb for everyone inside. The emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red as Evelyn Hayes crouched behind an overturned cleaning cart on the 28th floor landing. Gunfire echoed through the stairwell above and below her, a deadly symphony that meant her daughter was fighting for both their lives somewhere in the darkness. Blood trickled from a graze on her left arm where a bullet had come too close, but the pain felt distant compared to the crushing weight of decision pressing down on her chest. In her hand, she clutched the emergency phone Agent Santos had given her, its screen displaying a message that could save thousands of lives or doom everyone in the building. Flash traffic, urgent from FBI Tactical Command to Asset Nightingale, Evelyn Hayes. Russian assault coordinated for 0200 hours, need building plans and explosive locations, upload immediately. Lives depend on it. The choice was simple in its horror. She could upload the building schematics she had memorized during 3 weeks of preparation, information that would allow federal forces to storm the building and stop the Russian assault plan. But doing so would reveal her exact location to every enemy operative in the building, making her a target that even Patricia's tactical skills might not be able to protect. Or she could stay hidden, wait for rescue, and let thousands of American soldiers die in coordinated attacks that would begin in less than 5 hours. Through the concrete walls, she could hear Patricia's voice issuing commands with the calm authority of someone who had led men through hell and brought them home. Alpha Team, secure floors 30 through 35. Bravo Team, electrical systems and communications. Charlie Team, with me. We're going after the primary asset. The primary asset. Her daughter was risking everything to save her, and Evelyn knew with crystal clarity that Patricia would never abandon the mission to save one person, even if that person was her mother. She thought about the conversation they'd had in the safe house 3 weeks ago, about service taking many forms, about the dignity of honest work and the courage required to stand up for what was right. Her fingers moved across the phone screen, uploading everything she knew about Meridian defense systems. Floor plans, security protocols, the locations of the servers containing assault plans, even the maintenance tunnels she had discovered during her brief employment. The upload completed just as footsteps thundered down the stairwell toward her position. Heavy boots, moving with military precision, but too many to be Patricia's team. Target is on 28, a voice called in accented English. Uploading intelligence to American forces. Terminate immediately. Evelyn pressed herself deeper into the shadows behind the overturned cart, but she knew it was useless. There was nowhere to run, and even if she could escape, she had already done what she came to do. The Russian operatives appeared on the landing like ghosts made of Kevlar and automatic weapons. Professional killers who had spent years training to eliminate threats to their nation's interests. They moved with the coordinated precision of special forces, and Evelyn realized with grim clarity that she was about to die. But as the lead operative raised his weapon, Patricia's voice echoed through the stairwell with the authority of absolute command. "Drop your weapons!" The Russian spun toward the voice, but Patricia was already in motion. She rappelled down the center of the stairwell from 3 floors above, her descent controlled by tactical rope and 20 years of training. Her weapon fired with surgical precision, each shot removing a threat without endangering the civilian she had sworn to protect. Evelyn watched her daughter work with a mixture of terror and pride that nearly stopped her heart. This wasn't the little girl who had asked for bedtime stories. This was a weapon forged by the United States Navy into something magnificent and deadly. In 15 seconds, 6 Russian operatives lay unconscious or neutralized on the landing. Patricia landed beside her mother's hiding spot with cat-like grace, immediately checking for injuries with hands that were both gentle and efficient. "Mom, are you hurt?" "I'm fine, baby. Just a scratch." Evelyn gestured toward her bleeding arm. "How did you escape the desert? They said your vehicle was sabotaged." Patricia's smile was grim but proud. "They sabotaged the wrong vehicle. We've been using decoy routes for 2 weeks. I was never in that truck." The tactical brilliance of it struck Evelyn like lightning. "You knew this was a trap. We suspected. Too many communication intercepts. Too much enemy interest in your assignment. So we prepared for multiple contingencies." Patricia helped her mother to her feet, supporting her weight with easy strength. "But we needed them to reveal their full operation. We needed them to think they were winning." As they spoke, the sounds of battle throughout the building began to diminish. Patricia's radio crackled with status reports from teams that were systematically securing each floor. "Bravo team reporting. Communications hub secured. Enemy encryption protocols compromised. Charlie team. Executive level clear. Prisoner packages ready for transport. Alpha team. Roof secured. No evidence of escape attempts." But even as victory seemed within reach, Patricia's expression remained tense. "Mom, we're not done yet. The assault plans you uploaded show something that changes everything." She pulled out a tablet displaying the building schematics overlaid with new intelligence. Red markers indicated locations that made Evelyn's blood run cold. "They're not just planning to attack American bases," Patricia explained. "They've planted explosives throughout this building. If their operation fails, they're prepared to destroy all evidence, even if it means killing everyone inside." The choice that had seemed so clear moments before suddenly became infinitely more complex. Saving the building meant potentially allowing some operatives to escape. But letting them detonate the explosives would eliminate crucial evidence about the international conspiracy. "How long do we have?" Evelyn asked. "The timer system is tied to their communication network. If they lose contact with Moscow for more than 30 minutes, the building blows automatically. That gives us maybe 20 minutes before they realize their operation has failed." Evelyn looked around the blood-stained stairwell, thinking about all the innocent people who worked in this building during normal hours. Security guards who had families. Cleaning staff who were just trying to make an honest living. Even the criminals deserved trial and justice, not summary execution by explosive. "What do you need me to do?" Patricia's expression showed surprise and concern. "Mom, you've done enough. My team can handle the technical aspects." "Baby, I know this building better than anyone on your team. I know where they would hide things, how they would route wiring, which areas they would consider expendable." Evelyn's voice grew stronger as she spoke. "This is my building. These are my people, even the bad ones. Let me help." The decision Patricia made in that moment would haunt her for the rest of her military career. Every instinct told her to evacuate her mother to safety and handle the situation with trained professionals. But looking into Evelyn's eyes, she saw the same determination that had raised a Navy SEAL from a single-parent household in Phoenix. "All right, she said finally. "But we do this together. You don't leave my sight." They moved through the building like a perfectly coordinated team, Evelyn's knowledge of hidden spaces combining with Patricia's tactical expertise to locate and disarm explosive devices with minutes to spare. Each bomb they found was more sophisticated than the last, clearly installed by professionals who understood how to maximize structural damage. In the main server room, they discovered the most dangerous device of all, a concentrated explosive charge designed to destroy not just the building but 3 city blocks in every direction. The timer showed 8 minutes and counting. "Can you disarm it?" Evelyn asked. Patricia studied the device with professional assessment. "Not without specialized equipment. This is military-grade ordnance with anti-tampering mechanisms." They stared at the digital countdown in silence, both understanding the implications. 8 minutes to evacuate hundreds of federal agents and captured Russians from a building that was about to become ground zero for an explosion that would level half of downtown Phoenix. "There has to be another way," Evelyn said quietly. "Mom, sometimes there isn't. Sometimes you have to choose between bad outcomes and worse ones." But as the timer ticked down to 7 minutes, Evelyn noticed something that made her heart race with possibility. The explosive device was connected to the building's central computer system, drawing power from the same network that controlled everything from elevators to air conditioning. "Patricia, what if we cut the power?" "The device probably has battery backup. Cutting power might trigger it immediately." "Not the building power. The computer network power. The servers themselves." Patricia's eyes widened as she understood. "If we shut down the central computing system completely, the timer might reset to factory default settings. How long would that give us?" "Most military timers default to 24 hours. But if we're wrong?" The choice hung between them like a sword. Reset the timer and potentially save thousands of lives, or evacuate immediately and accept the destruction of crucial evidence about an international conspiracy. Evelyn looked at her daughter and made the choice that defined both their lives. "Do it." Patricia's hands moved across the server controls with precision born of years handling sensitive equipment under pressure. The building's central computer network shut down section by section, each system going dark as power was systematically cut from the core processors. The timer on the explosive device flickered once, twice, then reset to 23 hours 59 minutes and 58 seconds. 24 hours. Time enough to evacuate safely, preserve evidence, and ensure that every person involved in the conspiracy faced justice in American courts rather than dying in an explosion. They had won. But as they stood in the darkened server room, watching the timer count down from a full day instead of minutes, both women understood that their choice had cost them something irreplaceable. "We'll never be safe," Evelyn said quietly. "The people behind this conspiracy won't forgive what we've done. They'll never stop hunting us." Patricia nodded gravely. "I know, Mom. But some things are worth the risk." "Like what?" "Like knowing that thousands of American soldiers will come home safely because we chose to fight instead of hide. Like proving that service workers deserve respect and dignity. Like showing the world that a cleaning lady and her Navy SEAL daughter can take on international criminals and win." They embraced in the darkness, two warriors who had found their purpose in protecting others. Outside, federal agents were processing the largest counterintelligence operation in recent history. The conspiracy that had threatened American military operations on 3 continents was broken, its leaders in custody, its plans exposed. But for Evelyn and Patricia Hayes, the victory felt incomplete. They had saved lives and preserved justice, but they had also painted targets on their backs that would never fade. The choice they had made would echo through the rest of their lives. And as they walked out of Meridian Defense Systems together, hand in hand, they both knew that their story was far from over. The real test would be living with the consequences of doing the right thing in a world that didn't always reward heroism. But they would face whatever came next together, as they always had. A mother and daughter whose love had proven stronger than international conspiracies, whose courage had triumphed over systematic oppression, whose choice to fight had saved thousands of lives. The Hayes family had never been invisible. They had simply been waiting for the right moment to step into the light. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows of Conference Room A as Evelyn Hayes sat at a polished table that reflected her image like a mirror. But the woman looking back at her was transformed beyond recognition from the defendant who had faced false theft charges 6 months ago. Today, she wore a navy blue suit that complemented her silver hair, now styled with confidence rather than hidden beneath a cleaning woman's cap. The Congressional Medal of Freedom gleamed on her lapel, catching the light like a promise fulfilled. Across the table, Director Catherine Walsh of the FBI reviewed a thick folder marked with classification stamps that would have been impossible to imagine in Evelyn's previous life. Mrs. Hayes, the Meridian operation resulted in the largest counterintelligence success in FBI history. 47 arrests across 6 countries, the dismantling of 3 international arms trafficking networks, and the prevention of coordinated attacks that could have killed thousands of American servicemen. "Ma'am," Evelyn's voice carried a strength that surprised even herself, "I was just doing my job. Same as I've been doing for 20 years. Director Walsh smiled with genuine warmth. "Mrs. Hayes, your job description has changed considerably. Which brings me to why we're meeting today." She slid an official document across the table, its government seal indicating the highest levels of authorization. The President of the United States has personally approved the creation of a new position within the Department of Homeland Security. Special Advisor for Service Worker Intelligence. The role would involve training and coordinating civilian assets in corporate environments, developing protocols for workplace-based intelligence gathering, and serving as liaison between federal agencies and American service workers. Evelyn stared at the document, reading her own name typed beneath an official title that seemed impossible 6 months ago. "You want me to teach other cleaning ladies to be spies?" "We want you to revolutionize how America protects itself from internal threats," Director Walsh replied. "Custodians, security guards, maintenance workers, food service employees. They're in every office building, every corporate headquarters, every government facility in the country. They see everything, hear everything, and most importantly, they're invisible to the people planning crimes against America." The irony wasn't lost on Evelyn. The invisibility she had resented for 20 years had become her greatest asset, and now the federal government wanted to turn that asset into a national security advantage. "What about Patricia?" she asked. "Commander Hayes has been promoted to Director of Naval Intelligence Corporate Liaison. She'll be working directly with you to coordinate military and civilian intelligence operations. Mother and daughter, protecting America together." The conference room door opened, and Patricia entered wearing her dress blue uniform with new insignia that reflected her elevated rank. At 32, she commanded respect that had nothing to do with her family connections and everything to do with her proven ability to lead complex operations under pressure. "Mom," Patricia's smile filled the room with warmth, "I hear you're considering a career change." "It seems that way," Evelyn replied, standing to embrace her daughter, "though I'm not sure I'm qualified to advise anyone on national security." "Mrs. Hayes," Director Walsh interjected, "you've personally prevented international terrorism, exposed defense contractor corruption, and proven that intelligence operations succeed when they're based on human dignity rather than technological superiority. I can't think of anyone more qualified." Patricia pulled out a chair beside her mother, and they sat together reviewing documents that would reshape American intelligence gathering for generations. The training protocols Evelyn had developed during her 6 months of debriefing. The communication systems that allowed service workers to report suspicious activities without endangering their employment. The legal protections that ensured whistleblowers wouldn't face retaliation. "There's something else," Director Walsh said, producing another folder. "We've received intelligence that the network you exposed is attempting to rebuild operations in other countries. The Canadian government has requested your assistance with their own corporate infiltration program. The British want to discuss workplace intelligence protocols. Even the Australians are interested in what they're calling the Hayes method." Evelyn looked at Patricia with wonder. "The Hayes method?" "Intelligence gathering through invisible service workers," Patricia explained. "You've created an entirely new discipline, Mom. There are military academies teaching courses based on your techniques." The transformation was staggering. 6 months ago, Evelyn had been a cleaning lady accused of theft. Today, she was being invited to reshape intelligence operations for allied nations around the world. "But what about our safety?" Evelyn asked. "You said we'd always be targets." Director Walsh's expression grew serious. That's true. The remnants of the Nexus Group and their Russian handlers haven't forgotten what you cost them. But you'll never be unprotected again. Round-the-clock security, safe houses in 12 states, and the full resources of the United States government. More importantly, Patricia added, you'll never be invisible again. Every service worker in America will know your story. They'll understand that honest work has dignity, that their voices matter, that someone who cleans offices can change the world. Through the conference room windows, they could see the Phoenix skyline where it all began. Meridian Defense Systems stood empty now, its corporate charter revoked and its assets seized by federal authorities. But Sterling Defense Corporation had been renovated and reopened under new management as Hayes Security Solutions, a private company dedicated to protecting whistleblowers and investigating corporate corruption. There's one more thing, Director Walsh said with a smile. The opening ceremony for your new position includes a public address to Congress. The President wants you to speak about service, dignity, and the role of ordinary Americans in protecting national security. Evelyn felt a flutter of nervousness that reminded her of her first day cleaning Sterling Defense 15 years ago. I'm not much of a public speaker. Mom, Patricia's voice carried infinite pride. You spoke truth to power in a federal courtroom when everyone thought you were lying. You conducted intelligence operations that career spies couldn't accomplish. You saved thousands of lives by refusing to be intimidated. I think you can handle a speech to Congress. They spent the next hour reviewing the details of Evelyn's new position, the resources at her disposal, and the international cooperation agreements that would extend American intelligence capabilities into corporate environments worldwide. Every page represented validation that the skills she had developed through 20 years of invisible service were valuable beyond measure. As the meeting concluded, Director Walsh stood and extended her hand. Mrs. Hayes, on behalf of the United States government and the American people, thank you for your service. And welcome to your new career protecting the nation. But as they shook hands, Evelyn found herself thinking not about government positions or international recognition, but about the simple truth that had driven her from the beginning. Director Walsh, I appreciate everything you're offering. But I have one condition. What's that? I want to keep cleaning offices. The request surprised everyone in the room. Patricia looked at her mother with confusion, and Director Walsh seemed unsure how to respond. Mom, you don't have to do that anymore. You have a government salary, security protection, an official title. I know, baby. But cleaning offices is how I learned to see what others miss. It's how I understood that service has dignity regardless of recognition. If I stop doing the work that taught me who I am, I might forget why any of this matters. Understanding dawned on Patricia's face. You want to stay connected to the community you're protecting. Exactly. 1 day a week, I clean offices. Not as a spy or an intelligence asset, but as Evelyn Hayes, professional custodian. Because the moment I forget what it feels like to be invisible is the moment I stop being effective at protecting people who are. Director Walsh nodded slowly. Mrs. Hayes, that might be the most professional approach to intelligence work I've ever heard. 6 months later, Evelyn Hayes pushed a cleaning cart through the offices of a technology company in downtown Phoenix. But now, every employee who saw her knew exactly who she was. They greeted her by name, asked about her daughter's latest military deployments, and treated her with the respect that every service worker deserved. The young software engineers working late watched her work with fascination, understanding that they were witnessing living history. The woman who had taken down international arms traffickers was mopping their floors with the same care and attention she had given to every job for 21 years. In her earpiece, Patricia's voice provided updates on global operations that had grown from their original success. Mom, the Canadian team just broke up a money laundering operation in Toronto. Custodian reported suspicious after-hours meetings, exactly like you taught them. Any casualties? Evelyn asked quietly. None. Clean arrests. Full intelligence recovery. The Hayes method continues to prove itself. As Evelyn finished her route, she paused in the executive conference room where the company's leadership made decisions affecting thousands of employees. The same type of room where Jonathan Sterling had planned his fraudulent schemes, where Russian operatives had plotted attacks on American soldiers. But tonight, The room held only the lingering scent of coffee and the quiet dignity of honest work completed with pride. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Thank you for showing us that service workers matter. My daughter starts Navy boot camp next week. She says she wants to be like Commander Hayes someday." Evelyn smiled as she typed her response. "Tell her she already is. Service comes in many forms, and every one of them matters." As she packed her cleaning supplies for the last time that week, Evelyn reflected on the journey that had brought her from invisible servant to national hero. The path had been painful, dangerous, and transformative beyond anything she could have imagined. But the destination was exactly where she belonged. Protecting people who protected America, giving voice to the voiceless, and proving that love for country and family could overcome any obstacle. Tomorrow, she would return to her government office where intelligence analysts from around the world sought her advice on workplace infiltration techniques. She would review cases where service workers had prevented terrorist attacks, exposed corporate corruption, and saved countless lives through simple observation and moral courage. But tonight, she was just Evelyn Hayes, custodian, driving home through the Phoenix desert under stars that had witnessed the birth of American democracy and now watched over its continued protection by the most unlikely of heroes. Her phone rang as she pulled into her driveway. Patricia's voice, warm with daughter's love and warrior's respect. "How was work, Mom?" "Perfect, baby. Just perfect. How about you?" "Same. I'm coordinating with intelligence services in 5 countries tomorrow, but tonight I'm just a daughter calling her mother. And I'm just a mother who raised a Navy SEAL and changed the world by doing my job with integrity." They talked for another 20 minutes about ordinary things. Dinner plans, weekend visits, the small joys that made life meaningful. But underlying every word was the extraordinary truth that their love had triumphed over international conspiracies, systemic prejudice, and personal danger. As Evelyn hung up the phone and walked toward her front door, she paused to look back at the city lights spreading across the desert. Somewhere in those lights, service workers were completing their shifts with the knowledge that their work had dignity and purpose. Security guards understanding that their vigilance protected democracy. Cleaning crews recognizing that their invisible presence made them perfect protectors of American secrets. The Hayes family had won more than a legal case or a military operation. They had won recognition that every honest worker was a guardian of the American dream, that love and courage could defeat any enemy, and that sometimes the most powerful weapon against evil was simply refusing to be invisible when justice demanded visibility. 6 months ago, Jonathan Sterling had called Evelyn Hayes a liar for claiming her daughter was a Navy SEAL. Tonight, that daughter directed intelligence operations protecting American interests around the world, while her mother had become the most celebrated service worker in American history. Love had triumphed. Justice had prevailed. And the Hayes family would never be underestimated again. The story was complete, but the legacy would continue forever. A cleaning lady and her Navy SEAL daughter had proven that in America, anyone could become a hero if they had the courage to fight for what was right. Even if the fight began with nothing more than rescuing a laptop from a millionaire's trash can. 2 years later, the gavel's final strike echoed through the packed courtroom as Judge Catherine Brennan delivered the last sentence in what media had dubbed the Sterling conspiracy trials. Jonathan Sterling, now wearing an orange jumpsuit instead of expensive suits, received 45 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. His empire of corruption had crumbled completely, leaving him to face the consequences of betraying his country for profit. The defendant used his position of trust to endanger American lives and fund international terrorism, Judge Brennan stated. This court finds no mitigating circumstances that would justify leniency. In the gallery, Evelyn Hayes watched with quiet satisfaction. Justice had taken 2 years to fully unfold, but every person involved in the conspiracy now faced the consequences of their choices. Tommy Blake, the security guard whose false testimony had nearly destroyed Evelyn's life, had received a plea agreement in exchange for revealing how Sterling's associates had pressured him to lie. His 3-year sentence reflected his cooperation, but his security career was finished forever. Helen Cross, Sterling's former attorney, faced disbarment and 5 years in prison for knowingly participating in the cover-up. Her law firm had collapsed within months of the revelations, and her mansion in Scottsdale now belonged to the federal government as seized assets. The mysterious new CEO, mentioned in the Russian communications, had been identified as Viktor Petrov, a deep-cover intelligence operative who was captured attempting to flee the country. His extradition to Russia had been denied, and he now served a life sentence in a federal supermax facility. Of the 47 arrests made during the international operation, 39 had resulted in convictions with sentences ranging from 15 years to life imprisonment. The remaining 8 had agreed to cooperation agreements, providing intelligence that led to the disruption of similar networks in 12 other countries. Most satisfying of all, the Russian handlers who had orchestrated the entire conspiracy were now facing international arrest warrants. Their assets had been frozen, their networks exposed, and their ability to threaten American interests permanently crippled. After the sentencing hearing, Evelyn and Patricia stood on the courthouse steps where media from around the world had gathered for statements. But instead of speaking to reporters, they walked quietly to a small memorial garden behind the building. "Any regrets, Mom?" Patricia asked as they sat on a bench beneath a mesquite tree. "Only one," Evelyn replied thoughtfully. "I regret that it took me 68 years to realize that my voice mattered." Their security detail maintained a discreet perimeter, but the constant protection had become so natural that they barely noticed it anymore. The threats against their lives had diminished significantly as the conspiracy's leadership was eliminated, but Director Walsh had insisted on permanent protection for the women who had revolutionized American intelligence. "What's next for the Hayes method?" Patricia asked. "Expansion into private corporations," Evelyn smiled. "We're training service workers for Fortune 500 companies to identify everything from insider trading to intellectual property theft. Turns out that corporate corruption is just as dangerous to American interests as international terrorism." Her phone buzzed with a text message from Director Walsh. "Mrs. Hayes, the President wants to discuss your consulting role with NATO intelligence services. Are you available for a White House meeting next week?" Evelyn showed the message to Patricia, who laughed with pure joy. "Mom, you're going to be briefing NATO commanders on workplace intelligence. Do you realize how incredible that is?" "I realize that every service worker in America now knows their voice matters," Evelyn replied. "That's the only incredible thing that matters to me." As they prepared to leave the courthouse, a young woman approached them hesitantly. She wore the uniform of a courthouse custodian, and her nervous expression reminded Evelyn of herself 2 years ago. "Mrs. Hayes," she said quietly, "I wanted to thank you. I've been cleaning these offices for 5 years, and yesterday I noticed something suspicious in the county commissioner's office. Financial documents that didn't look right. Because of your story, I knew I should report it instead of ignoring it." "What happened?" Patricia asked. "Turns out the commissioner was embezzling federal emergency funds. My report started an investigation that's going to return $2 million to hurricane relief efforts." Evelyn embraced the young woman with tears in her eyes. "What's your name?" "Maria Sanchez. And my daughter just graduated from college because your foundation provided her scholarship." The Hayes Foundation for Service Worker Education had been established with the proceeds from Evelyn's book deal and speaking engagements. In 2 years, it had provided college scholarships to over 300 children of custodians, security guards, and maintenance workers across America. "Maria, you're a hero," Evelyn said simply. "You saw something wrong and chose to speak up. That's exactly what heroes do." As they walked toward their armored SUV, Patricia reflected on how completely their lives had changed. "Mom, do you ever miss the old days? When life was simpler?" "Simpler isn't always better, baby. Our lives are complicated now, but they're also meaningful in ways I never imagined possible. We're protecting democracy itself, one honest worker at a time." The SUV pulled away from the courthouse, carrying them toward a future where service workers were valued as guardians of American security, where a cleaning lady's wisdom was sought by presidents and prime ministers, where a Navy SEAL and her mother had proven that love, courage, and integrity could defeat any enemy. Behind them, the courthouse stood as a monument to justice served and wrongs made right. Jonathan Sterling would spend the rest of his life in prison, understanding finally that the woman he had dismissed as worthless had possessed the power to destroy everything he thought he owned. The story that began with racist arrogance and false accusations had ended with love triumphant and justice complete. Every question had been answered, every wrong made right, every loose end tied into a perfect knot of resolution. The Hayes family legacy would continue for generations. Ordinary people could accomplish extraordinary things when they refused to accept injustice and fought for what was right. And somewhere in America, another service worker was watching, listening, and preparing to speak truth to power when the moment demanded courage. The circle was complete, but the impact would last forever. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, wait until you see what's coming next. It's even more powerful and inspiring than you can imagine. So don't go anywhere. Click on that video showing on your screen right now to dive into another amazing story that will absolutely blow your mind. Trust me, you won't regret it.